So we discussed variables in the last session. Now I want to discuss scope in this session. So inside of JavaScript, if I just simply type in my variable equals 10, that is in global space. Global space is a bad thing. There's a few things that have to be in global space, and certain frameworks that you'll use will have some object or a few objects in global space. So it's required because that's how the language itself works. However, the majority of your logic, majority of your variables should not be in global space. They should be localized to a function. JavaScript is a functional language. It reads like a classical language, but it's actually a functional language. So that is a global variable. In fact, I'll just call it global variable. I'll put the var keyword on here. That var, in certain circumstances, will make that a local variable. If you don't put the var on there, it will always be a global variable. But if you put the var on there, it will be a local variable as long as it's not set up like this is. Since I'm not inside of a function, this will still be a global variable. Let's talk about functions. If I write a function by using the keyword function and call it my function, now I'm inside of this function. If I move some variable up here into my function, that will now be a local variable. If I did this, this would be a global variable. It's in a function, but I don't have the var keyword. So if I try to reference some variable down here, JavaScript interpreter doesn't know what that is because that was defined inside this function, so it doesn't know what it is. On the flip side, if I do another global variable, it does know what that one is. Okay. In fact, even in Visual Studio, you'll see we'll actually highlight that, versus if I do some variable, you'll notice that Visual Studio is not highlighting the one in the function because that's not the same variable. So that isn't defined anywhere, and that one is. Even though this, the first time it ever showed up was inside of this function, it's a global variable. And just like if I do that, global variable, you'll see that shows up. Now, in order to actually run this, this isn't valid. JavaScript here just calling those things out. So instead, I'm going to do another function. Open close parentheses. Open curly brace, close curly brace. And I'm going to put some stuff in here. So I'm going to say var a equals sum, var b equals that, and var c equals that. Okay. And I can actually say document.write A, B, and C. And we see it runs. There's no errors. There's no problem. Okay. Now, the thing is, nothing's actually calling this code. Okay. So down here, I'm going to actually call my function, and then I'm going to call another function. Okay. So I've defined them up here, what they are. So this is a function. This is what this function does. Here's another function, and this is what that function does. Okay. And now I'm going to actually call the first function, and then I'm going to call the second function. So on index, again, we have this script referenced. So the HTML page will load. When it's done rendering the body, it hits this script tag. It kicks off, loads up the app.js, shows this into the JavaScript interpreter, and starts running it. Okay. So by simply having those, it would set up this global variable called 10, create these two functions, but it really wouldn't execute these. So in order to execute them, we actually call them, in this case, down here. Okay. So now I'm going to run this. And you'll see here, we get a JavaScript runtime error. It says some variable is undefined. Okay, so our variable called some variable, it's undefined. Okay, so let's break. And this is expected because we set this variable up here in this function. Okay, we put the var keyword like we should have, so it's a local variable. It's not a global variable, it's local to this function, which means this function doesn't know about it. It has no idea that that thing exists. And so by us simply putting some variable in there, it's undefined. It doesn't know what that is. So I'm going to get a runtime error. Since some variable is undefined, we're going to delete it. And since we deleted the variable a, we need to remove the reference to it since that no longer exists. So let's run this. And we'll see it prints out global variable ... 10. This is what we were expecting. Because down here, well, the first thing it does is it sets global variable to 10, creates these functions, and then it calls each one, calls my function, which then sets some local variable to, or the local variable, some variable to hello. And then it sets another global variable to global space variable ... Okay. And then we call another function. Another function creates a local variable of b. It assigns the local variable of b the same value of another global variable, which is this guy right here. Okay, so now b has global variable ... C gets the first global variable that we set, which has 10. Okay, now we say write out b, which is global variable ... and write out c, which is 10. So we could put some HTML markup in here, add in some line breaks, run it again, and you'll see they'll be on different lines. Global variable followed by 10. So that is to explain global variables versus local variables. But how should we actually write our code inside of JavaScript if we know that we should not use global variables because all JavaScript files are loaded in the same space? And so if one JavaScript file uses the global variable called, let's say we have a page. So we say page equals my page. Okay. And now let's say this is my code where I'm doing some logic and I have page in global space and I'm keeping track of the current page the user's on or something of that nature. Okay. So let's then say I'm using some other JavaScript, maybe from a vendor. Okay, so I'm using some third-party JavaScript, and they also decided to use this same variable. Okay, so they're going to call page. They're actually going to make it a number because for them, a number means something in their system. Okay, so they're going to set page to 9,000. I'm setting page to my page. Let's go to our index so we can actually reference this new, fake vendor JavaScript. So let's put the vendor JavaScript above ours, right? Because typically you would load a library, some other JavaScripts out there first, and then you would load yours. Okay. In order to show how this works, the vendor.js has a function, calculate page. Okay. It's going to say has a local variable called page value, and it will simply say it needs to say page plus 500. Okay. And then it's also going to do a document.write page value. Right? So this is information from the vendor script. It should be 9,500, right? Because page is 9,000. Okay, so page is 9,000, and then page value is a local variable that we're assigning to get the value of page, which is 9,000 plus 500. Okay, so let's say that then this code in here that the vendor has written is doing logic based off page being a number, and they're adding some number to it to come up with something else to maybe find an internal page ID in their system or who knows what. But in our app, we don't really didn't know how the vendor's doing their stuff. We just know they have certain functionality that we want, so we load it into our page here. And so what we're going to do here is just add a quick button. So the idea is we have a button where we're going to have the vendor determine their page value. And this is just something you wouldn't typically do, but this is a quick way to have a button actually execute a particular function in JavaScript. So when we click that button on the page, it's going to call this function, which should, in theory, take page of 9,000, add it to 500, and then write that out on a browser window. Okay? So now we have set the same page variable as a global, just simply called it my page. Okay? So let's run this. And we see it has this button, and then it has this global variable intent. Okay, so I'm going to hit this, and now notice what our document says. Information from the vendor script. It should be 9,500, but what is it? It's my page with a 500 tacked on the end. Okay, so that demonstrates the problem with global variables. Okay, and just to spell out what's happening here, in our index.html, we're referencing two JavaScript files. We're simulating that we have some script from a vendor. We don't necessarily know how it works. We just know they have a function called calculate page that we want to call, and it's supposed to give us some number back. Okay. With this value, again, we're expecting this to be some number. Okay. We don't know how that's working, but the way they did it was they made a global variable called page, and they set it equal to 9,000. Okay, or the idea is, page, and it would get this 9,000 from some internal process. Then when we call calculate page, they're expecting page to be 9,000, so they're trying to add 9,000 plus 500, so that this guy right here should be 9,500. However, after we loaded their script, we also loaded our script, right? So this is kind of our app JavaScript. Now that we loaded our script, the very first thing we did in here is we clobbered that variable. Their page is in global space and our page is in global space. They have the exact same name, so we overwrote their number with our string. And in JavaScript you can do that. And that's actually a very powerful thing in JavaScript, that you can change a type on the fly. But so the idea is we did this because we're using page somewhere else, even though we're not actually using it in our code here. But the idea is, we're doing something and we want page to be a text string, maybe the actual, index.html or whatever else. Okay. So the problem is now when we actually click the button here that calls this calculate page, it comes down here, grabs page, but that page is no longer 9,000. It's now my page. And what it does is it takes that string my page and then it concatenates 500 to it. So it says, okay, you're a string and yeah, you're a number, but I can't add a number to a string, so I'll just concatenate it, add it to the end, append it to the end. And that's why when we run this, you get my page 500, because it takes the value in page, which is my page from the app.jss, and it adds or concatenates, appends 500 to it. So that's why the value is now my page 500 instead of 9500. Now, this could be corrected if one of us did the right thing, if either the vendor did the right thing or we did the right thing. Okay, so right now we're going to make the vendor do the right thing. And I'm going to come in here and make it a var page of 9,000. And now, when we run this, that's a local variable. And so now we actually get 9,500. Should be 9,500, and well, we're actually getting 9,500. But the problem is, it is beneficial to have a variable outside of a function, right? Because what if we have another function called getPage? So this is another function this imaginary vendor has. And what they do in here is they say, I want to take the global page and I want to add 25 to it. And so this is one way to write this code where you say, okay, I have my page, and what I want my page to equal is page plus 25. So I want to add 25 to the page. So anytime getPage is called, I want to add to there. So now what we're going to do is up here in this calculate page, we're going to say we need to call getPage. Okay. So the idea is now is we're going to have 9,000 plus 25, which means that our final answer should really be 9,525, right? Because we're taking 9,000, adding 25, plus adding 500. So again, if we do that, we're still going to have the same issue, right? We're expecting 9,525, and instead we get my page 25,500. Okay? And the reason why we're getting 25,500 is because when we call this getPage, well, page at this point already has the text, the string my page in it. So it takes that value and it concatenates, it appends 25 to it. So now when it gets down here, page has, what page is at that point is page is my page 25. Okay? And then when it's done over here, it becomes my page 25, and then it appends the 500. Okay? So that's why we had that value. I'm going to clear that out. So we're back to our original problem of where the vendor can't really make this a local variable to this function. He needs it outside of this function in order for his logic to work, right? So in order for multiple functions to work on that variable, he needs it outside of here. On the flip side, let's say for us, we only need it inside of this function, right? So I could make our code correct, so the application code correct, by moving it out of global space and putting inside this function. Okay. So if I run that now when I click this button, it should be 9525, and it is 9525, right? Because we did not clobber the global space out here. There's a really cool way in JavaScript to get around this, where my app, so let's say right now my app does need to have this page both inside of here. So for example, I'll say some variable is going to be hello plus page. Okay, so hello plus page is what that's going to be. And I'm going to make this if you will, a global variable. I'm trying to make it local because I'm putting the var keyword, but I'm not inside of a function. So it's still going to be a global variable. Okay? So now, by me removing that var here, I'm referencing this variable that I've kind of created globally. Okay. So now down here, I can actually say document dot write and say, some variable. Right. So the idea is we'll get, and in fact, just to get rid of the, we'll put a BR in front of it since we were jutting up against that button earlier. And again, this is all temporary throwaway code. So I'm trying to explain concepts here. Do not write JavaScript this way yet. Okay. So I'm trying to get concepts down. I want to make sure that we understand why we're going to be doing the things that we're going to be doing, following the patterns we're going to follow, and trying to explain the pitfalls and the reasons why we're going to be writing code in a certain way. Okay. So definitely don't take this code and just start willy-nilly writing JavaScript. You'll end up hurting yourself or others. Okay. So at this point we have page in global space on our side, and we have page in global space on the vendor side. Okay. And again, let's say the vendor wants to put the var keyword, right? We should put the var keyword because again, down here, even if we don't put the var keyword, that definitely makes it a global variable, right? And that's really bad because this could have been a mistake. Maybe this variable shouldn't have been a global variable. It should have just been inside of, this function, but the programmer forgot to put the var keyword on there. Okay. So the vendor is using the var keyword, wants it to really be kind of a local variable, but it can't be because it needs to be used in both of these functions. So it's going in global space. We have our own page that we need to use in, two different functions, let's say. So let's say right here we're going to print some variable, and then the other thing we're going to print so we're going to print some variable, then the other thing we're going to print is page itself. Okay? So we're going to print some variable, and we're going to print page. So we're just trying to simulate that we have two different functions that need this page value. Okay? So I'm going to run this. And so we say, hello, my page. And that's because, let me put a break line there, a new line there, and run that. Alright, so we see hello my page, and then we see my page, global variable, and 10. Okay, so some variable, which is hello my page, and then we write out page, which is my page, and then like we had before, global variable, and then 10. Right, because C is getting this global variable, which is getting 10. Okay, so we're going to click the vendor button and get the same problem where the vendor's code is going to expect a number 9525, and instead it's going to get this crazy thing, and when it's trying to do its logic, it's it's going to try to divide by this number or do something to it, and instead it's going to have a string, and it's going to have all kinds of errors, and it's going to be very hard to figure out why. Okay? And it's all because they used a global variable and we used a global variable. Okay, so how do we fix this? In our next lesson, we'll discuss two different patterns we can use to fix this problem.